Welcome to the final episode of Let's Talk Season 3. I am Jackie Hill Perry. Jasmine and Melissa and I have enjoyed talking about applying biblical wisdom to everyday life, and we hope you've enjoyed listening in. I believe that you did or will. I don't know. The great thing about a podcast is that the episodes don't go away. They don't disappear. They will never leave you nor forsake you. So if there are any that you might have missed, you can go back and find them at tgc.org/podcast.
Today we're going to answer some questions that have been sent by listeners, and y'all are nosy.
They sent in a lot.
Y'all be want to know a lot of information.
Mm-hmm. They think we know everything.
They asked everything except the brand of deodorant we use.
I know. It was a long list.
So, Melissa, what's our first question for the day?
Okay. Ooh, this is an interesting one. What's your number one tip for improving communication in marriage?
Improving
nudity.
Oh, what?
That's our next question, Jasmine.
So, I mean, you know,
or
vulnerability.
Maybe that's your answer for
it is
everything.
Seriously, my answer is nudity.
How do you overcome shame? Nudity. How do you...
I don't know. I think first you have to get over the hump of what's keeping you from communicating, whether that's fear, whether that's shame, whether that's pride, you know, all the things. But you just kind of have to get over yourself and be willing to talk about the hard things and the good things.
Yeah.
You know, you just got to talk, actually.
Yeah.
Like, I remember there was a season in our marriage where it was just a rough time, and we were probably married for 6 months, and so, you know, that's when everything hits the fan usually, and we didn't have enough money for cable, and so our cable was cut off. I might have told this story before, but follow me. And in that time, because we didn't have TV, we were forced to talk. But it was crazy because it actually helped our marriage, not because we were talking about the hard things all the time, but we just became friends again, you know. And so just turning off TVs and things and just talking.
That's good. That's good. I think too, there's a difference between proactive talk and proactive speech and reactive.
Explain.
And I think in marriage, you can get into reactive. Like I'm reacting to the fact that I've been secretly mad at you for the past 6 months because you keep, you know, leaving your socks wherever, you know, and so I am now going to pour out all of that from this past 6 months on you because I didn't proactively tell you earlier on, hey, it's really bothering me that you're leaving your socks there. And so I think that's the type of communication, the reactive kind, it's not healthy, you know, and I can fall into that very easily. So I try to be more proactive rather than stuffing and then reacting.
Yeah, suppressing is totally a thing.
Yeah.
I think also knowing your spouse, getting to know your spouse, finding the understandable part of your spouse. I know not everybody is into the Enneagram, but learning when my husband and I first started reading my Enneagram, and he was like, I really identify with being an Enneagram 8. Now, whatever you think about that, knowing the fact that he identifies with that description when he reads it, when I go and read it, it's really helpful for me to be like, okay, so that's how you're processing. That's how you're thinking. When you say X, when you say Y, this is what you mean. And so an example of that, the other day I was out. Philip is an Enneagram 8 and he has ADHD.
Okay.
So he's in his office upstairs above our garage, and I go out there, and I was kind of feeling, sometimes I just feel like lonely during the day, so I go out there and find an excuse to talk to him. I'm just like, hey.
So sweet.
What do you want from the grocery store? I like eggs too. So I was kind of like lingering, and he goes, are you going to be out here long? Because I have to get back to work. And I just looked at him, and like my immediate reaction was like, excuse me. But then I stopped and thought about it, and I was like, he is being really task oriented right now, and he is afraid that if we get off into a conversation, he's going to forget what he was thinking about, what he was doing, what he was. And so I kind of was like going through all that in my mind. And it was so funny because, again, pregnant, so like hormonal, I didn't realize that I was like tearing up because he had hurt my feelings. So over on his side, he was like, oh, and when I said that to her, she felt like I didn't want to be with her. And she felt, so like both of us were like trying to think for the other person. It was just a really good communication moment for us because I was able to be like, that was kind of hurtful the way that you said that, but I understand why you said it that way. And he was like, thank you for understanding what I needed, but also I should be way different when I'm communicating it to you. So understanding each other and being for each other is
That's
really
actually really
helpful.
huge. Yeah, the more I started to understand how Preston thought and how he literally does not think like me, it made me much more gracious and gracious even towards myself.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, I don't communicate well all the time, and I'm assuming that you should understand me. But no, I just need to be clearer.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And personality tests are huge. I remember the first time, this was a different type of test, but I read Mike's, the grouping of his. I was like, hold on, there's a whole group of people like you? I thought you were the only one and you were just wrong about some things. And then just to realize, oh, it's just a personality type, and it's so different than mine, and that gave me understanding. I do think that's.
Well, speaking about marriage and communication, I have a question that the naked lover over here would love.
Nudity.
How do you talk about sex in marriage?
It's the same tool set. Like understanding, finding the understandable part of your spouse and finding the understandable part of what they desire, how their desire works, so I grew up hearing all the time that men were just like lust-filled monsters who, like, if you showed your clavicle, they were just going to be like, oh my gosh, I must have you. So when I got married and my husband was like a regular person around me, I was like, I'm not
Wow.
the most desirable person that you've ever seen. I'm confused because my whole life they told me that if I unveiled this clavicle on you, you were going to be putty in my hand. And now the clavicle is out and like, you ain't putty. So what is this?
Yeah.
So learning that he wasn't just some man, right? But like learning what he needed and what he wanted and what he desired. And for him, vice versa, was really helpful. Because I think so much Christian sex advice just assumes that women are one way and men are another way.
Yes.
And a lot of times in our marriage, it's flipped. And that made me feel like something was wrong with me for a really long time until I realized that, no, actually, you're just two individuals and you were made for Philip and Philip was made for you.
Yeah.
And this book is not understanding that.
Yeah. And I think it's also probably important to understand your sex life as a form of communication. And that maybe if something is wrong there, something is wrong in your regular communication. To me, or maybe a better way to say it is it's a temperature gauge of how well your communication is going. It says something. And so it's good to keep watch on what's happening there because it's communicating something about your marriage. And it's just good to be thinking about it. Like, what is it really cold and distant? Well, that probably is because something else is going on, so I think it's a good gauge to keep watch on.
Yeah, sex has been something that me and Preston have had to communicate about often because, I mean, sex is it was introduced to me in a really traumatic way because of sexual abuse. And I think even the pornography thing, watching pornography from the age of 7 to 19 really did a doozy on the way I understand sex and sexuality and the body. And so it's something that we always have to process through because I have these filters by which I see sex that affects us, and so I often have to explain it isn't me rejecting you, it's rejecting how I feel during a particular act. And so I think it's really been super helpful for him and for me in our marriage as a whole that we've had to really just work through so many sensitive and intimate things that have grown us intimately, or it's grown our intimacy emotionally, which then affects us sexually. And so yeah
That's good. Actually, that leads into another one of our questions I kind of feel like is why don't we talk about women and porn use more in the church? Because it's affecting not just men in the church, it's affecting women in the church. But we typically hear it kind of like what you said, Jasmine, as a male problem. And how do you think that is even affecting the shame attached to it and all of that for women?
Yeah, I think it's just that whole separation of like blue sexuality versus pink sexuality. Like women are emotional and they just want to be held and they just want to, they're like pressure. They're like crock pots and men are like microwaves. And if you want to have sex with your wife, you have to come home from work and you have to be, doing stuff for her so that she is ready and willing. And my newlywed self was like, whatever. Hi, let's go. Let's do this. So I felt crazy. And I think that a lot of women who struggle with lust or pornography are often made to feel like they're an anomaly because all of the conversation about sex and temptation is really centered around men being the ones who struggle with temptation and women being the ones who have to like be the stopgap for the temptation and cover the dangerous clavicle area.
Hide your ankle.
And I think we have to acknowledge that there are different mediums by which people engage in pornographic material. And so whereas men are highly inclined to deal with visual porn, women they statistically are more inclined to romance novels that have pornographic material in it. And so I think that might be why, because we don't look at reading a really sexually explicit book as being pornographic, because it's not people on a screen having sex.
Or even where it is people on a screen having sex, like Outlander or Bridgerton, or but as long as there's a plot, then it's fine. I remember like when Bridgerton came out and I was watching it and I was like, wait, what guys? I was like, what are we doing right now? I didn't finish Outlander, same reason. And, you know, those are choices that everybody has to make based on their level of maturity and based on their level. Because some people just know how to pick up the button and fast forward. And some people are not affected by the same thing. So that's not like a judgment. But I do think that sometimes we get away with watching certain things and imbibing certain media because there's more to it than just the sexual aspect. And so we're like, oh, yeah, I like Bridgerton because, you know, the costumes. Are so good.
Yeah, and those costumes keep coming off. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just because it's a period drama.
Exactly.
It makes you feel like it's a little more refined.
Yeah, it makes you, exactly. Yeah. And it's because it's like takes a while to get to that, you know? It takes like, you're in like the 4th or 5th episode before you're like, oh wow, the bodice is ripped. Okay.
Yes. And that can actually be something that's a little more shocking. Like when you're, you know, if someone's going after strict porn, they kind of do know what they're going after in some sense. So I do think, you know, our world is trying to give it to us.
Is that much more deceptive then?
Yes, it's more deceptive. That's exactly right. Now, I don't even think I've understood the difference it's made to have video, like online video access. Like when I was growing up, the only option for kids seeing porn was an old Playboy magazine.
Right.
And, you know, and so it was so different. You know, you had to actually go buy it. I mean, so just my access to it was so much more limited than what kids have today, where they can stumble across something and they're just curious, you know, and so they see something and they're like, what's that?
Yep.
You know, and so I do think it's a really tough thing. But I think with women in particular, I've heard that when it's addressed, particularly from the pulpit only to men, it actually makes them feel more ashamed. You know, that it's not being discussed as a male and female problem, that this is something that women are drawn to as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that is important, that it should always be men and women are fighting this. I will say this, though. I do think it has definitely affected how women are sometimes viewed in the church, because if our leaders are watching this, it's going to affect how you view women in your life.
Has to.
And so I think, and it's obviously, I don't know how it's going to change how women view men in some ways, but I think it makes us more dangerous through no fault of our own, just because it's out there. And so it really is such a difficult struggle for both men and women, you know, in our world today. And I think it's changed a lot of things. I think it also changes our marriages. That's what I've heard from a lot of younger women who struggled when I was in women's ministry. One of my friends who shared with me some things, it affects marriage because she didn't feel like she lived up to that standard.
Correct. And
that's a whole, you know, you're now competing in a bedroom with all these scenes.
Yeah.
And that's going to affect your marriage.
Or it affects women who are attracted to kind of the perverted, dominant men that exist in things like 50 Shades of Grey,
Yeah.
who are not passive,
Yeah.
who are in control, who are doing those things. And so you kind of then are attracted to men who dominate you in ways that are not godly, where you kind of are attracted to those types. Let me stop repeating myself. Yeah. And so I think it definitely, it does not renew our minds.
No.
Right.
In the way that God delights.
That's right.
It really does renew our minds in a really dark way. But we thank God for the Spirit.
Yeah.
He's able to recreate.
And I think we can say to anyone struggling, find an older woman in your church and actually talk to them about it. It doesn't have to have shame. If we have struggles in this area, go find someone who can talk to you and pray for you.
Yeah.
I think we'd all say, I think people are more understanding. Hopefully, I say that, I mean,
it's hard to speak up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But this doesn't change unless we start doing that.
Exactly.
And somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Speaking of homes.
Well, we just went like so deep, and
I
now we're
know.
gonna come back up to the show
coming back to
and
some
talk
fun
about
ones.
some DIY. So, ladies, DIY, yes or no?
Sometimes.
Oh, you're a fool. Yes.
I can't even believe you said sometimes.
No, because that was the season I was in. Okay. And so I decided to stain my steps and paint my wall
Yes.
and, sand and paint my baby's crib because we were in an entire pandemic.
But that's
and I
enough
had
for you to say
nothing
yes
to
forever.
do.
Like that's forever. That's enough activity to say yes forever.
What do you mean?
Like if I had done all three of those things, it wouldn't matter if I never did another DIY thing in my life. I'd be like, I'm a
that's more than I've ever done.
DIY goddess.
I will say that, I think working and renovating and beautifying my home is just an extension of my, creative side. And so, yes, insofar as it helps me to, express myself creatively and make something beautiful, sure. But, the cats that will, install trim and, tearing down walls and installing windows by themselves, I'm not that. I'm going to pay somebody.
Yeah.
I'm going to find you on Yelp. I'm gonna give you this down payment for you to go to work. I'll paint. I'm not tearing down nothing. I'm sorry.
I'm not even gonna paint.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law is at home right now, and she was like, "Hey, while you're out of town, I might come over your house and paint the boys' room for you.
It's kind of fun.
Is that okay?" And I was like,
And I
Have at
secretly
it.
just
Yes.
I love the smell of paint. Secretly.
well, she got the no smell vanilla paint.
Oh,
I know.
it's no fun.
She did. She's like, "I'm just worried about you because you're."
I like the
pregnant."
clean smell. It feels like the house
It feels
is
like
clean.
fresh. It
I,
feels new.
I kind of like when things smell toxic. Gas,
that's another-
Wow.
markers,
Today in True Confessions of Let's Talk hosts.
like the nail salon, the stuff they
Sniffing
put
the
on
glue
you,
over there.
acetone, all the things. No,
No.
got it. Feeling shame. Let's go back to episode 2.
Don't feel shame. It's
Okay.
okay.
I know. I don't have any DIY.
person.
I wish I
See,
did.
We feel shame about that.
I know.
So
I totally
no, you
wish I
shouldn't.
did.
you're just
You
over
are-
there. Proverbs
we are
31
all
in it.
creating something.
Yes.
That's all DIY is.
I-
is creating.
I do garden. I create a garden.
Okay, there
and
you
I
go.
love creating a garden. I
You just
love.
gonna leave me like that?
Yeah, sorry.
That is DIY.
Wow.
Yeah,
She really just left
I do
me.
love a garden.
You're creating a kid.
I am doing that.
You didn't do it yourself,
I didn't.
but
I'm doing it myself right now.
you are you in the Lord's hand.
I know. Here's another one, especially because we have TGCW 22 that we'll all be at coming up this summer. What women's events have impacted you, if any have impacted you?
Glory, Jackie's event.
Oh, did you go?
No, I haven't been to a single event.
Okay, but it's impacting you.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, because Jackie is so fly. Like, I don't even know what you'd be talking about, but you just be on stage, her wing be flipped, and the outfits.
She had the yellow suit.
A yellow suit.
You guys are really worldly.
We are. Yeah.
No, nothing
You
spiritual.
be
just came
looking
out of
real
your mouth.
good, and I just be like, yeah, I know her. Yeah, that's my friend.
Okay. I'll be the holy one in the group.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did go to one women's event maybe 5 years ago. And I think what made it really unique is that they were walking through themes related to, I think, atonement or something. And one thing I really appreciated is that after every session, the worship songs were centered on the text or the theme that was that was touched on during the sermon. And so it wasn't vague, it wasn't broad, it wasn't like, she talked about atonement and then we start singing about, I don't know, sanctification.
Right.
You understand? And it just was like, this really makes the worship connect to the session. And I don't know, that seems so small, but I guess to me, I was just like, I really like how thoughtful and intentional they were in making sure that what they taught and what they sung were the same.
Did she have on a yellow suit though?
No, because it was about Jesus.
Not the yellow suit, but the yellow suit.
It helps.
She should have wore red. Blood on the doorpost.
I have to say, and I'm not saying this because I now work for TGC, I went to the first women's conference at TGC. I think it was in 2012. And it was the first time I'd been to a women's conference that we weren't talking about womanhood. And for me, that was just so refreshing because I was there with a girlfriend and I remember looking at her and I was like, we're just talking about the Bible. It's so nice because it's not that I'm fine talking about womanhood, but when that was just the topic year after year after year at every women's event, I just kept thinking, I could really hear talk on kindness and on joy and on patience. I remember at that conference hearing John Piper talking about Isaiah 6, and it was all on the glory of the Lord. And, he made this wonderful contradiction. King Uzziah is dead and the Lord is seated on his throne. But then he talked about the robe filling temple. It was just this great moment. And I was like, this is, I'm getting this image of God's greatness. And I actually need that to be whomever I'm called to be. Anyway, it was just this, it was just one of those changing moments of, I love having a conference for women that's about God. Yeah. And I love getting to be there and getting to study. So
I still return to like 2 TGC sessions over and over again. One of them is Mike's. He talked about women in the church, and I ended up reading his book, Women in the Church, afterwards. And I'll never forget because it's so funny because he's not stoic, but like that's how he comes across. And so I walked up to him one time and I was like, I loved your book about women in the church. And he was like, oh, great. You're one of 3 people that read that. He was like, you understood it? You liked it? Like, wow, that's interesting. Yeah. So Mary Wilson at the time, now Mary Hannah, has a session that's basically about, is God chauvinistic? Is God misogynistic? And
that is a great session.
When I was going through the Old Testament again, I returned to that passage. I did it for myself. I did it when I was teaching high school and we were doing ancient history.
Yeah.
I did it I just returned to that one over and over and over again. I'm not much of a conference person.
Yeah.
When I go to a conference, I'm usually a participant.
Yes.
But that particular session, literally life changing.
Yeah. No, that was a great. Maybe we could put it in the show notes for this episode because that one was a great one.
You may not be into women's events, but are you into sports at all?
No.
What about you, Melissa?
Absolutely. I love sports. I was such a tomboy growing up. I can remember in 4th and 5th grade, all the other girls were over on the playground on the swings, and I was on the soccer field. I was the only girl on the soccer field. And I was like, why would I be anywhere else? I love sports. So I played soccer in high school, played tennis in high school. I love playing ultimate frisbee.
That's sweet.
You're sweet.
You're so sporty. You're so cool.
I love playing all that stuff.
I wanted to be in sports because I just wanted to do something good that other people couldn't do. But when I was in 7th grade, I signed up to run track. And then the teacher, he was a math teacher. Look at that. He was the math teacher and the track coach. And he said that, we're going to start working on running a 5-minute mile. And I said, I'm going to go home. And so it never clicked for me. But I do watch it. I watch basketball and stuff because Preston does. And so I do get into playoffs. I'm not going to keep up with it.
Yeah.
But I know what's happening.
We watched that Michael Jordan movie together, me and Philip, and it was so funny because he was so patient with me because I was just like trying to put everything into context.
We're like, who's Michael Jordan?
Like I was like, oh yeah, Michael Jordan. He's like, yeah, you know who he plays for? I was like, yeah, the Bulls. He's like, well, what else do you know? I was like, Space Jam.
Oh,
Space Jam.
I love a good sports documentary.
That documentary was very
Sports
good.
documentaries are so inspiring.
And he like paused it so many times. It was like explaining, like he was like, that play was amazing. And then he was like, do you want to understand why it was amazing? He pauses and he's like, okay, so here's what happened. And I was like, you're so sweet to me because I don't understand.
Playing a sport, or at least trying, does help you enjoy it more. I remember, I think it was on our honeymoon. Our honeymoon had like a little par 3 golf course. And so I'd never played golf before. And so Mike taught me. And it was after that I grew to actually love watching golf. I never had before. And then I was like, it's actually hard to hit that little ball.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes you appreciate what Tiger Woods is doing when he goes out and does what he does.
It's
like,
magnificent.
You're like, oh, that's hard. Yeah. Anyway, so playing something can make you appreciate. You actually know that's not easy to get that basketball up like that. And,
Childbirth is my only extreme sport. That's all I got.
You are the athlete.
That's all I have.
You're winning. You're winning on that.
For those moments in my life, I'm an athlete.
Okay, here's another. This is an interesting question. What's the remedy for compassion fatigue? So first, what is compassion fatigue? And then what's the remedy for it?
I struggle with compassion, so y'all will most likely have to teach me.
Is compassion fatigue like where you're just giving so much of yourself, so much empathy and so much like feeling that you just get exhausted? You're like tired out from it. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think it's, this was my interpretation of the question. Now we can see into so many more homes and so many more windows with social media. Like, so I actually know in real time that today, what's happening around the world. Like we might know how COVID is raging in a foreign country now in a way that we wouldn't have known even 20, 30 years ago. And so there's so much going on. And then you've got a friend's friend who has cancer. Right. And you've then got somebody else's child who was in this accident. And, you're just going down your skull. Please pray for this. Please pray for this. And these are people that you sort of know.
Right.
But they're not, they're not really close in your life. And so how do we deal with all that's coming at us?
I think we have to make sure that we're actually being faithful and compassionate with the people that are in our lives so that it's not performative.
Yeah.
Because it can so easily become performative on social media where it's just like, I'm going to retweet this or I'm going to repost this or I'm going to, so people know that I know, because if they know that I know, then that somehow will do, so I think being careful that the compassion is being meted out in your day-to-day life.
I think when it comes to the compassion fatigue, one remedy in some sense is just to accept our limitation. We can only take in so much. We can only do so much because, sometimes I feel like I'm 5 days behind on whatever happened. And then you feel like, oh, I totally missed it, whatever. But I think to say, am I in the moment doing the good I can in the world I'm in, when I see it, whether it's like at the grocery store and you see a lady who's in a wheelchair or having a hard time getting up and you just stop to help her. I think that's sometimes what we miss, kind of like what you were saying, Jasmine. And in my real world, am I doing what I can to love my neighbor and be aware of what's going on, around me, right? But also rest in the fact that a better country's coming and know that we can do good things here, but we're having to wait for a better final land. But that's,
it's a tension.
It's a tension because I don't want to say we can't do anything.
Right.
Because we can.
Right. And we should. We do. And,
exactly.
But we live in that tension of the already and the not yet. That like we can make changes and we can bless people and we can spread awareness and we can pray. But also there's only so much we can do.
That's right.
Because we're finite. Yep. And because this world is broken until Jesus comes back.
Yep. That's right. And I think we can be like the prodigal father who was looking out for his prodigal son. It wasn't like he was in the house. He was looking when he was coming up the thing. So we can be on the lookout for who needs help today without thinking I need to go do that on social media. I don't know. That feels like kind of a way we, I think, like to pat ourselves on the back and say I shared something or whatever.
Yeah.
Versus even if it's just personally, quietly praying. Okay, I pray about this situation in this country right now, and just doing it really quickly.
Yeah.
I think
and
that's
even in your own life, because sometimes compassion fatigue can come from being compassionate to people. Like people in helping professions can get compassionate fatigue.
Oof. Yeah.
But that again, going back to our boundaries episode, it's really important to prioritize.
Yeah.
What is God asking us to prioritize, and what do we have to just say? You know what, I can't today.
That's right.
I'm just going to pray for that and trust God to take care of that for today, and then tomorrow maybe I'll have renewed energy to face.
Yes.
Whatever.
That's right.
Ditto.
So this is a good question for both of you. What are some practical ways to get time away from the kids? Come do a podcast.
Take long showers. If your water bill can handle it. No, seriously. My getaway more times than not is that to really just take a breather. But I've found times where I just have to be, and I know this isn't a circumstance for all mothers, because there are some mothers that are single mothers, where this kind of question is more complicated to answer. But for me, I've often had to tell Preston, hey, I just need an hour. Like, can you just kind of be here where I can just, and I one time I went upstairs and I laid in my closet with just worship music, because I was like, I was so full of thoughts and ideas and stresses and duties and all the things, and I was like, I'm gonna yell at somebody if I don't decompress in this moment. So just telling someone I need a break, I think that's okay to do.
Yeah. Every night when Philip comes in from work, he knows it's his turn. So and I was definitely raised on the principle of like, Daddy's been at work all day, so when he comes in, you have to like set the stage for him to rest. And not in my household, because my dad never had a typical 9 to 5, but like that's what all of the ladies at our church, that's what that was a thing. And it's totally different. Like Philip comes in from work and he told me one time, he's like, but you've been working all day too, so we're just gonna work together till bedtime. So he will give me like, I'll make dinner. He'll take over with the boys while I'm making dinner, and then I'll feed them. And then after dinner is dad time. We're gonna hang out with dad, watch a show, do whatever. But mom is usually in the bathtub. Usually.
I did for years always lock the bathroom door. And I would just kind of be in there for a while. And it was just because kids will bust in even if the door's not.
Oh, they totally will.
All the time.
Yes. They'll just they just think they can talk to you at any time. Even when you're going to the bathroom.
Yeah. We don't come in while I'm like literally on the toilet and be like, how's it going? You okay?
And you're like, I'm like trying to get away from everyone right now. I will say one thing I am a big believer in, and I established this with all my kids at a really young age, is room time.
Oh yeah,
I think huge. Kids need to learn that they can be alone and be okay with that. And so when my kids, they would take the nap, and then when they transition, what I did, I made it act like a big reward. So I'm like, well, guess what? If you want to stay up in your bed, you can, and you don't have to go to sleep. And I'm going to put some books here, but you got to stay in your room for this long, or whatever. I really was a big believer. And then it changed to their whole room. And so my kids all did that for years. And so I'd have like an hour and a half every afternoon that I could have just some quiet. It wasn't perfect. I mean, when I say stuff like that, kids come out. There's always, whatever.
Hoot has learned how to unlock the baby gate.
Yes.
It's like a new era.
Yes. But it was just the pattern. And I have seen it as my kids have aged. The benefit is all my kids can entertain themselves. Like, without electronic devices, they all have interests. They all like to read. I mean, they're all comfortable being alone. And I think that's really important. And it was really important for me. So it was just, that was a way I could get a little time by myself every day.
Yeah.
And that was
I am team room time all day.
Yes.
And we'll say it, hey girls, room time.
Yep.
And they just know, go ahead, march down that hall, play with your toys.
Yep.
I don't care. You can make a fort.
That's right.
Do whatever you want. Just do it away from me.
Yep.
In Jesus' name. I think one question that we received, which is one worth discussing is, in light of this pandemic, in light of just living in the world in general, loneliness is a thing, you know, and I think we all even go through seasons, married, unmarried, with children, without, having a job, having not a job, having a nightlife, not having, like, where you just have these seasons of loneliness. How do we deal with that? How do we cope? How do we help friends that are in lonely places?
I think it's important to understand that everybody gets lonely, because sometimes I find I'll be talking to people, like I'll put up a question box on Instagram and somebody will ask a question and be like, well, it's really easy for you to talk about X because you're married and I'm single and I'm lonely and I wish that I had your problems instead of my problems because at least you're not lonely. And there's just such a misconception that wifehood and motherhood means an end to loneliness, but sometimes it can be. It's been for me, because I got married at 24, most of my seasons of loneliness and seasons of intense isolation have been as a mother and have been as a wife. And so I think, like, extending the conversation doesn't erase the unique struggle of single Christians. Rather, it kind of unites us in this common thing that we all struggle with at different points in time. And there's something so uniquely depressing about married loneliness. Where
It's
like,
very unique.
they're right there. Like, I shouldn't feel so alone, but like bridging that gap for whatever reason during the season is really difficult. Or motherhood, loneliness in motherhood, where I just remember when Philip and I moved back to Mississippi when Wynn was 6 weeks old. And we lived in Pickens, Mississippi, on a dead-end street that backed up to the woods, and the woods backed up to the highway. Our house had a tin roof, so we had no reception. We had one car. Philip drove it 45 minutes into Jackson every day to go to work. And I lived on the same street as my in-laws. There's no place to go out to eat. There's no stoplights. There's nothing to do. There's a dollar store. And I had postpartum depression, and I didn't realize it. And so Philip would come home from work every day, and he'd say, "What did you do?" And I'd say, "I don't remember." Like, I could have maybe just sat here and stared at that one spot in the wall over there all day, but I don't know. I don't know what I did, because I was alone. I was lonely, and it was so crippling and so difficult. And so my heart goes out to anybody who during the pandemic has experienced that level of, so if the pandemic would have happened that year, that would have been perfect. Oh, like,
I'm already here.
Wow, we're here. We're like in the wilderness. We don't know anybody. This is great, or not great. But for anybody who's experienced that during the pandemic, my heart does go out to you, and I relate to that feeling of just like loneliness and depressiveness. And I think what I ended up doing with it was, first of all, somebody had to tell me, like, hey, this is depression, and it's not okay that you feel that way, and there are things that we should do about it. And so something that I did is I got a job. I started teaching again. I had taken like 9 months off of teaching. I started teaching again. It was just twice a week, and it was a way for me to get out of the house. I started writing again. That's when I started blogging again. That's when I started writing some stuff for TGC, and then I spoke at a couple conferences, and then I started kind of coming out of myself and being more purposeful about being involved in ministry and in people's lives. So the answer to loneliness wasn't actually my husband or my kids. It was the body of Christ. And so often I think that's the case.
Yeah. It's difficult sometimes, though, because I don't know how y'all feel. I mean, we're all introverts. And sometimes the hardest thing for me is, because I've gone through some of the probably deepest loneliness in my life in the past 2 years because of a church situation that we went through. But the weird thing was, what I almost didn't need was more people. Like, sometimes you think the antidote to loneliness is people in your life. But it was so hard for me because social things became hard because of what was going on. And I do think there are certain places of loneliness that I felt the tenderness of the Lord saying, I know, and I'm with you, and like there's a verse that says no one else can know our sorrows and no one else can share our joys, or something. Like I think there are certain pains, and maybe it's the loneliness of singleness, or the loneliness of church hurt, or the loneliness of a miscarriage, or the certain things that we're going through. I do think there's this place that only the Lord can meet, and maybe by design, so that we run to Him, because it's difficult. It really is difficult. And that, not to say, I still remember what Jackie, I think you tweeted it a long time ago. What healed my church hurt the church. Yeah. So I think there's this both and. There are going to be certain things only the Lord can hit, but we desperately need the body of Christ to help us in our loneliness. And it's so hard because sometimes that's where the wound happened. And so it's just this strange place. It takes faith to keep plugging in and keep going in and keep entering in. But I think we can all say it's worth it.
And I'm glad that y'all both kind of highlighted that loneliness doesn't necessarily mean lack of community. But really it's even the people I'm around don't see me. And so I think that's where the leaning into the Lord thing happens, was because it's like, you do see, you do hear, you are knowledgeable about my situation. And oftentimes the way that you remedy it is through other people reminding me that you see me. You ever had that person where you lonely and they text you and say, hey, you were on my heart. It's like, oh man, like that's a reminder that the Lord is placing me on the heart of other people, because He sees my circumstance, and now He's opening up a door where I can be seen by another human being by saying why I was most likely on your heart,
That's
and
right.
so
I think that is just one of those good things to remember, is that sometimes when I'm feeling lonely, I realize other people are lonely too. And so I think one thing we can do is exactly what you say. Sometimes I've just asked, Lord, will you bring to mind people I need to pray for? And then by reaching out to them and just texting and saying, hey, I was praying for you today. Sometimes you can feel connected, because I don't know how y'all feel. Like sometimes I feel way too busy to have another social engagement. Like I want a deeper connection with people. Anyway, so I think there are ways that we can reach out to others that don't require a lot of time, but can make us feel connected.
That's good.
I don't know. Okay, last of the questions. This is a sad way maybe to end the season. Maybe it's a good way to end the season. What song would you want sung at your funeral?
I love funerals. I'm a bit morbid. I like watching serial killer documentaries, and I've Googled like the autopsies of famous people, and it's just me. But as far as funerals, two songs are what's the word? Like it's not like I'm a resurrect and come for my kids if they don't make sure this is on the list. Great is thy faithfulness. And it needs to be sang by somebody that's churchy. I don't want no great is thy
no acoustic guitar. Great is thy faithfulness.
I don't want that. I need somebody churchy. I need an organ. I need somebody screaming and yelling. Time. Yeah, I they need to be screaming and yelling.
Yes.
I need at least 16 tongues to follow. And then the other one is Total Praise by Richard Smallwood, because Total Praise is Total Praise. If you've never heard Total Praise, go to YouTube, type it in, and then you're going to understand why I need that. That's it.
My two are I Won't Complain. I love I Won't Complain. If by chance I could become friends with Cynthia Erivo before I die,
you want her to sing it,
and then she outlived me, that would be my actual dream.
That would be a very pretty rendition.
There's after The Color Purple ended, they sang it to, well, it didn't end. I think Heather Headley was leaving her, I'm a Broadway person, but she was leaving her role, and Cynthia Erivo sang the first verse of I Won't Complain, which I already love so much, and then she sang it, and I was like, oh my God.
And she sings like an angel.
She sounds like an angel. It was beautiful. So then on the opposite side of that, like I want an angelic, like I Won't Complain, and then I want like a squalling, like throw your shoes in the air. I'm going up yonder.
Going up a yonder.
And I want the bass.
But do you want it while like they're marching your body down
Yes.
the aisle? Because that's when I've seen it. It's like it's
That's
what they
what
do
I
on
need.
the way out.
I need it to be like, and now she's like, I won't complain. And I need people to be like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful and angelic. We love her. And then when I'm walking out and they're saying I'm going up yonder, they're like, it ain't even about her. It's about Jesus. Like, let's go.
You're being walked out. You being carried.
March me. March me out of there to going up yonder.
I think they played that during in Tony Evans' wife's funeral, Lois Evans, when she was being when her body was being moved out of the sanctuary.
As soon as like at the beginning of that song, as soon as the singer's like, if anybody asks me, I'm like, wait, what?
If anybody
what are you about to do?
asks you
I'm ready.
Where I am going.
Y'all have thought about your funerals way more than I have.
No, I have a whole plan in my brain.
I realized when I saw this question, I was like, I'm so excited because I won't be here to plan it.
I'm mad about that, actually. I'm really bitter.
I know. And I'm like, gosh. So I read this. The first thing that popped into mind was Great Is Thy Faithfulness. That was the first one for me. But then I really love, and I know it's a like classic funeral hymn, but I really love Be Still My Soul. I just love it. I just love the words. I love it. And I kind of like that it's sad and somber because I think it's okay to be sad, but it's hopeful too. But it's you know, but I had not really thought of this. So I'm glad it will be recorded now. So Mike will know.
Come back to season 3, episode 9.
Exactly.
When we move on to glory.
Yeah. To close up season 3, if you are at a dinner party and you only know one person or you only know the host or something like that, how do you strike up a conversation with someone who's around you?
I don't.
Basically, we only would talk to each other.
I really sincerely, I live in Jackson, Mississippi, and it's very old South. And so I went to a dinner party, my first dinner party in Jackson, and the hostess sat us next to people who we didn't know on purpose. Like, we didn't sit next to our spouses.
That's so scary.
And I was just like, what am I supposed? And it was like a bunch of nerdy white people. Like, it was like, well, in the words of Shakespeare, like it was
mint julep.
Yes, it was. We had a palate cleanser, y'all.
Okay.
Oh, some sorbet.
It was. I mean, it was delicious food. The conversation was very intellectual and very like, you know, where you like do a joke in Latin and you're like, oh, and they're like, oh, herb. Like it was very. And I don't think I struck up a conversation with anybody. I think I just sat there and was like, I took Latin in 6th grade.
I'm not a conversation striker, but I feel like I always end up next to people that are. And so that might be a part of my expectation is that I don't have to initiate it because there's some extrovert roaming around here that cannot wait to speak to the quiet person.
Yes.
It's like they're attracted to the quiet person. Like, oh, you're not talking, so I need to talk to you.
Let me help you.
Yes, I just kind of,
Yeah.
I follow their lead.
Yeah, I have kind of a running list of questions in my brain because here's what I find. People generally like talking about themselves.
Yes.
So if I just ask a couple of questions, then they're going to talk. And so that's what I do. And so it might be if we're at like a wedding, I might say, how do you know the couple?
Right.
Yeah. Or if I just meet someone, I'll say, so where did you grow up? I try to ask safe questions because there are certain questions you realize that can get really complicated.
Who did you vote for in 2020?
Oh, yeah, I'm not going to ask that question. But even asking, what do you do? Well, then they're like, oh, I'm actually in between jobs. And then you're like, oh, maybe, I don't know. Or, I mean, I've asked a woman I just met before, so how many kids do you have? And then she's like, well, 3 here and 1 in heaven. And you're just like, oh, then, you didn't even mean. So I try to ask what I consider. Most people grow up somewhere.
Yeah.
What are pretty safe questions?
I know a question you can ask.
Oh.
What song would you want to be played at your funeral?
That would
Great
stress
one.
me out.
It's a really great one.
These are the things I realize I have not thought
Then you
about.
can Jesus juke if they're not Christians and say, well, we're all going to die,
We're
right?
all going to die someday.
So do you know where your
And
soul
This
is
is why
going?
y'all don't talk to people.
Are you?
Do you know where
Is
you're
your
going?
funeral going to be an opportunity to share the gospel of Christ with the soon-to-be dying as well? Or
Do
is
you
it
hold
going
their
to
wrist
be...
and say, pray with me. Say this prayer along with me.
Yeah, y'all should just remain quiet.
Jesus, I'm a sinner. I acknowledge it.
Come into my heart.
We're thankful that Crossway has been sponsoring this season of Let's Talk. And specifically today, we're going to be chatting a little bit about the book from Paul David Tripp, Do You Believe? 12 Historic Doctrines to Change Your Everyday Life. Jasmine, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'm going to read this quote because I want to get it exactly right. He says, true belief is always lived. So in the book, he kind of talks about these 12 core doctrines, what they are, why they're important, and how they impact our everyday lives. And so it seems like a good kind of primer book. Maybe it'll be a good book to read during devotions.
Yeah.
A good book for small group, home group.
Yeah.
Good.
And we don't have to be afraid of the word doctrine.
No. And Tripp makes things so simple.
Yeah.
Which is so good.
Because doctrine is really just what we believe about God. So it's not scary. But sometimes I think we hear that word and we're like, I'm going to read one page and want to stop.
But he does a really good job of connecting it to everyday life too, which is really good.
Yeah, that's good.
Jackie, where can we find it?
Well, sadly, I don't have this one in my trunk. But Amazon, the other bookstores, it is available. Or you can go to crossway.org/plus to find out how to get 30% off. Because like I said before, the saints love a good deal. Well, thank you for joining us for this season of Let's Talk. If you find yourself needing something to listen to in our absence, check out the other shows from the Gospel Coalition Podcast Network at tgc.org/podcast. Thanks, y'all.